And it's good afternoon to the Sportsfan Radio panel. And our special guest today, Roddy Reynolds, who's joining us again, better known for appearing on SEN's The First Serve. Tennis is in the air, so we've got to get Roddy back on to talk tennis. He was controversial and had a bit of a controversial discussion with Coutta last time. So welcome back to the program, Roddy.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
And it's good afternoon to the Sportsfan. Oh, hang on. I've got a bit of feedback there, gentlemen. Just bear with me for a second. Who's joining us again, better known for... There we go. That'll fix that. All right. Now, after an unfortunate start, Roddy, let's look at the women's side of the draw. Australians should be ecstatic that one of the women has managed to get through to the round of 16. She got to the quarters last year, so proving it's not a fluke. Alana Tomljanovic, what are your thoughts about how she's going?
Flying, absolutely flying. She does have the game for grass. I think that she's such a clean ball striker. The clay, probably a bit more variation, so it doesn't suit her as well. But when she's on, absolutely a top tier talent. She seems to be one of those players that if she's a couple of % off, her game overall drops drastically. But if she's on, I mean, she showed last night she can beat anyone, taking out Barbora Krejcikova. Massive win, French Open champ last year, if I'm not mistaken. And in the biggest news of the night, on the women's side, was Iga Swiatek getting taken out, which means that Tomljanovic, who would have faced Iga, now has Elise Cornet in the next round, who's no slouch herself. But the winner of that match goes into the spot, essentially, of the number one seed, which makes things a little bit easier.
So, Cornet's, as you said, no slouch. I see she's also still in the doubles and still in the mixed doubles, so she's having a great tournament.
Yeah, a great year as well. In the Aussie Open, I believe she made the quarters, and she's 32 years old, Cornet, and I think she's played something like 50 or 60 Grand Slams, and that was the first time she made it through to the quarters. So 32 might be the new 22 at this point. She's having a really good year.
Coutta, we'll get you in here.
Can I sort of say something quickly, Mark?
Yes, certainly.
Roddy, I watched a bit of the game yesterday and she was well behind and made a very, very good comeback. As she progresses through, like a record against top 10 players is not that good compared to, I know this was a previous French title winner from a year ago, but coming back from injuries. How can she go with a start like that against the better players as she progresses?
Yeah, it is interesting because obviously 3-set tennis, it can be over sort of before you get going. I think that one thing that will be helpful is that the women's draw is so open that there is every chance she won't face someone who's top 10 caliber, even if she was to make it through to the final. I know that the winner of the Cornet match takes on, at best, the 17th seed. So there is still plenty of opportunity. Yeah, look, definitely an issue, her top 10 record and that sort of thing, but she might not have to face it. So I guess fingers crossed at this point.
Thanks.
Coutta, how have you seen the women's draw going so far?
Well, it's like most Grand Slams for the females, is that the top seeds, there's some surprises in the first week. I think early on, it's just a matter of grinding matches out, and like Isla's, she's done that. Last night, she wasn't as sharp as to start with, but fought back from a set down and won the match quite easily in the end. And as Roddy said, she's such a clean ball striker, like good serve, a huge forehand, and the backhand solid. And on grass, it's a manufactured grass, I'll say. Like, we won't criticise the groundskeeper or anything like that, but it's a grass that's a lot slower than what it was. And so really the ball doesn't come on like it used to, and it used to ping around. So, no, for her to get to the fourth round is a terrific effort. She's obviously the lead Australian at the moment. And if she wins, she goes into the quarters. And again, like, Cornet is a player that at times is mentally fragile. So hopefully she can get behind on the court, and that she will just blow up again. So let's hope for Isla to get through and make the quarterfinals. And as Roddy said, she's having a terrific year. She's our number one at the moment, obviously, with Ash retiring, and I think we'll only get better from here.
I take it that it didn't surprise you that the other 5 Australians didn't get out of the first round?
I think that we discussed it last weekend, and we thought that they would struggle to get through the first round and definitely not through the second round. Yeah, obviously, I think there's a bit of talk at the moment that Australian tennis is like we've got 4 players, and I know we'll talk about the men shortly, but from a depth perspective, we are struggling a little bit on the female side of things with Ash retiring. Obviously, Daria Saville coming back from injury, and her performances have been up and down, which have probably summed up her career a little bit. But yeah, no, disappointing that we couldn't get more through. Zoe Hives got an injury in her match, played on and acquitted herself quite well for her first Wimbledon. But the other matches, yeah, obviously it's some disappointing results there, Professor.
Roddy, did it surprise you that the first, second and fifth seeds are all out? It seems to me that that's been happening regularly, certainly in the majors this year, whereas the men seems to follow a far more
predictable.
The seedings seem to fit in with those who make the finals, but the women's all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, the women's game's been so open for so long. Basically, since Serena came off the absolute peak of her powers, it's sort of been this way a little bit. Ash was easily the most consistent performer on tour. She dominated when she was there. She didn't win everything, but she was always at least making quarters, semis, that sort of thing. It has been open, and it's felt like until last night that everyone's kind of been just getting out of Swiatek's way. At the French, it was a similar thing, lots of early seeds dropping, but I guess it's just a product of a more open and competitive field. Iga obviously being the exception. So it is a bit quirky. And in the women's game, there seems to be more variance based on surface. So like in the men's, we're so used to seeing at the top of the men's game, the same blokes dominating week after week, irrespective of if they're playing on dirt, grass, carpet, hard, whatever. Whereas in the women's game, the nuances are probably a bit more evident. So yeah, I mean, it does make for an exciting field and some good stories with a few surprises popping up.
I suppose you've got to say, yeah, go on, Judge, or Gelding.
Well, saying that the top seed, Roddy, I thought she wouldn't drop a set at the tournament. On the back of obviously her French Open form, but there were some cracks that started to appear in the last couple of rounds. She hasn't been as dominant as what she was, and obviously last night she's come unstuck. But Ash matches like last night, Ash used to just find a way to win.
Yep.
Like she wouldn't be playing perfectly, but Ash would just grind a win out in those circumstances. And I think that might be the difference between what we're seeing now with the number one in the world to what we were used to. And the same with Serena as well. Serena was a terrific fighter and a battler that would just give everything and find ways to win.
I agree. So I agree. And I think that, I mean, winning 37 matches in a row, it's at some point you got to drop off. You know, no team goes undefeated for a year. No player goes undefeated for a year. It's always sort of going to happen. Last night didn't feel like the match that it would happen. So yeah, I guess there's an element of that to it as well. But it is, I hear what you're saying, and I definitely agree.
Just a segue on that, both the question for both Roddy and David. Serena coming from the heights of probably the best women's player ever, and that to be defeated in the first round, you know, missing most of last year. What does the future hold there? Or you know, is she damaging her own legacy by continuing to play? I don't know, just your views on it, or what she should do. I think
what the future holds for her, who knows? She sort of said in her presser, I think it was, who knows when I'll pop up. Like, she might not play till the US Open. I think that there was an element for this Wimbledon that last year, if I'm not mistaken, she got knocked out in the first or second round, was injured. It was a bit of a sad sort of scene. I think that there's an element of, who knows, she might not be able to come back next year. She might not want to. And so I think her coming back this year was a bit of a better way for her to be sent off. Even if she did lose, she looked really happy on court. She gave the crowd a fist pump and a wave as she departed the court. So I think there might have been a bit of an element of finishing things on the right note, given her illustrious career there.
Yeah.
It's such a good way to look at it, Roddy, that she's got nothing to prove. Like, she's done absolutely everything in the game, and she should be credited for the way that she's changed women's tennis. Her and her sister, obviously, Venus, took the game to a new level. They took the game from just being pure tennis to also being physicality and being bigger and stronger and hitting the ball harder than the other girls. That you now see it, they've come up. Now, she actually didn't play a bad match against Tan. Like, she was not bad, but it wasn't the Serena we're used to. And that might be a byproduct of playing minimal tournaments and not being that match hard fitness. So would you love to see her keep playing? Absolutely, because she's one of those people that brings people to the tennis and you get to watch. And genuinely don't think that she's doing any harm to her legacy at all, or damaging her. I think you're right, Roddy, last year was a disappointing loss. It was and the way that she was on court looked as though she was sort of not a struggle to be there, but I think she looked as though she wanted to be elsewhere. Whereas this year, I think she looked more invested in Wimbledon. She looked more invested in her tennis, and she looked to be in that happier space. So the US Open obviously is the next Grand Slam. She'll play that. It doesn't matter what ranking in the world she is. There's no ranking points for this tournament, of course, which is just staggering stuff. But she'll play the US Open, and I suspect she'll probably go quite well there. But she's just a sensational player. Like the match, one of the points the other night I think went for 20, and it was just terrific. A really hard hitting standard, and the other girl just got the balls back and made her hit an extra one or extra two shots, which Serena, back in her prime, would have been crunching away for winners.
Yeah. Well said.
Coutta, can I just give a different view? When you say she's got nothing to prove, she's got nothing to prove to us, because I think you're quite right. She's apart from Margaret Court's statistic, she is the greatest player of all time. But that statistic, I think, actually plays very heavily on Serena. And I think had, for instance, she had broken the record, say, 3 or 4 years ago, I think she would have actually retired. Stay with motherhood, just investing in that. But I just get the impression she's a one-off, Serena. She wants to get that record. She feels that it should be hers. And just what I've seen of this, the little we've seen of her in this tournament, I actually don't see an actual reason why she needs to pack it in. The men's are playing to their late 30s. The women's game is a lot easier. The 3-set compared to the 5-set. I don't see that there's a real cohort of absolute champions out there. A couple that we thought a couple of years ago, particularly some young American girls, I think we thought they'd go further into the tournament. So it might be the time is right for her to snatch one and, who knows, 2 to actually pass Margaret Court's record, despite the fact the age is saying it's virtually impossible for her to do so. I've got faith in her.
It's a different way to look at it, isn't it? That the record is there and it's looming large. And she's been, when was her last Grand Slam? 2 years ago, was it now?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, obviously opportunities to win the Grand Slam tournaments are once or 4 a year. And she won't get many opportunities, you would think, Judge, but does she need to hold the record?
I think she thinks she does. No, that's the point. I think she actually thinks she does. And it's so close. When she retires, that's it. There goes that chance. But I actually think to her, not to us, to her it's important.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of merit in that. I think she's had 3 opportunities now to equal Margaret Court's record. And in those finals, it appeared, I mean, she wasn't at her best, but I mean, the weight of that sort of stuff can't be underestimated. You look at Novak in the US final last year against Medvedev. The bloke had barely been troubled in all 3 Grand Slams. And as soon as you get told, right, you're playing for a calendar Grand Slam, you know, be on a pedestal with Rod Laver, I mean, that plays a role. And he wasn't able to live up to it in that one moment, despite all that he's done before him. And Serena might be the same. But yeah, I would love to see her get one more. I think that would just be amazing.
Roddy, how is she playing? I mean, I only saw the highlights of her game, but I imagine you would have seen the game. But how's she playing? How's she moving? That's the key to it, because if you slow down, it becomes irreversible, I think. But I think
that the thing with Serena is her serve is always going to be there, and it's still such a big weapon. So it kind of like, I mean, any big server on either tour, you can stay in matches on the back of your serve, but her agility isn't what it was, and she looked a bit slow. Her lateral movement was lagging, let's say, and you can't really get away with that. I mean, she certainly wouldn't ever get away with that on a clay court. But, I mean, she hasn't played for a year, so if she goes through the training block, does all that, and if she can get the fitness to a point that she knows she can get it to and has got it to in the past, there's no reason she can't get on a roll on a hard court especially. It's just how much can she hide what she lacks in her agility.
And
the other thing, Judge, the other thing, Judge, is that Serena doesn't have that aura around her anymore either. That when she plays, you're the underdog, or you know that you're going to have to play off your chops to actually win it. So that's another part that sometimes she'd already won before she was on court, and that's the sign of a champion. And but at the moment, I think that as we sort of discussed, is that she's not playing, and so she's not having that match hardness and the training to be able to say, right, I know that I'm going to win this match. Every match is wide open with her. So you would love to see her equal the record. She probably deserves to for everything that she's done for tennis. But will she? That's probably the great question now. Okay,
let's just wrap up the women's now. Roddy, with those that are left still in the tournament, who do you see as winning it?
On the women's side, I'm going to go out on a limb and say Amanda Anisimova. I'm a massive fan of her game. She just took out Coco Gauff. Draws opened up without ego. Ons Jabeur is also one that could really make a deep, deep run. But for the sake of making a pick, I'll say Anisimova.
And Coutta?
Well, the win last night by Roddy's pick there was impressive, and her performances through the first week have also been so. It's wide open. Obviously, we would love to see Isla Tomljanovic go deep into the tournament. But let's stick with Roddy's tip. I think that that would be great for tennis, and a very worthy winner as well.
All right, let's look on to the men's side of the draw now. Coutta and Roddy, if we had said last week that we'd have 3 Australians in the round of 16, I think we would have laughed and thought we might have been taking some enhancing drugs to improve our view of what the draw looks like. But Kubler, Kyrgios and de Minaur have all made it through.
How bloody good. It's
I think
so good.
The first name there is the one, Professor, that I think we should be really pumped about, and Roddy would know better than me, but Jason Kubler's put through some injuries, worked his ass off on the satellites. Like the satellite tournaments are where you really earn your street cred, and the hard yards that you do, sharing rooms, playing tournaments at tennis centres with no crowds, earning $10,000 a tournament. And then, as we said last week, Judge, to play the matches in qualifying, be hard fitness, and come out and make the 4th round of a Grand Slam is just a huge effort, and certainly something that, unfortunately, and we'll talk about it, but unfortunately for Australian tennis, has been a little bit overlooked because of the antics and the performance of another player. But Jason Kubler deserves all the credit that he's going to get. And let's hope that he can go. Let's hope he can go further, because he's a great young kid, and is everything that's good about tennis.
Yeah, he's Kubler. I mean, I'm not sure if you guys have discussed it before, but this kid, when he was growing up, going through juniors, we're calling him the next Rafa. He's that good. His backhand is as solid as any out there. He was on some ridiculous 30-something match winning streak in the junior tournaments as a kid, like could not be stopped. Knee injuries came along. He's had like 5 knee operations or something. At one point, his knees were so fragile that his doctors said, never play on a hard court again. So if you're going to play tennis, can only play on clay. And so for 2 years, he just played when everyone else was at the Aussie Open, he was over in Ecuador or something like that, and playing those satellite tournaments, really grinding away. At one point, with ups and downs, I think he's pretty often cited as having 14 cents in his bank account when he got home and had to start coaching. So yeah, awesome to see. I was watching him, I think it was in November, playing like state league tennis against Omar Jasika. And I mean, it's not to say that you looked at that match and thought any of this was possible, but he looked solid and you thought, okay, maybe, who knows, maybe he might get a bit of luck here and there. But 3 matches through qualies, now 3 main draws. I just can't imagine how happy he'd be. He'd be so good.
How far can he go?
How far can he go? Well, he's got Taylor Fritz next. Taylor's had a great year, but I mean, that underdog status, some people can really relish in it, and he's clearly seeing the tennis ball like a beach ball at the moment. By no means should he be favourite or close to it to beat Fritz, but I mean, stranger things have happened. The question will just be his fitness at this point. Like that 5 sets would have really taken it out of him. 6 matches across a week and a half. Who knows? He's in with a shot.
Coutta, you were saying?
Yeah, it's one of those things, Professor. 5 sets allows you to sort of have a bad set here and there, but he beat Jack Sock, who's obviously got a big game about him. And Taylor Fritz has had, as Roddy said, had a terrific season as well. And like most Americans, he also has a fairly big game. So you wouldn't say he can't win it, but he's definitely up against it. And probably the way that he likes it at the moment, that underdog status, and no one giving him a chance to go any further. What it does do for him, though, is we've talked about previously with the Australian Open and the wildcards, this sets Jason up for the rest of the year, but then his opportunities going forward in the future as well. So hopefully it means that his ranking improves, where he doesn't need to qualify, allowing the opportunity to play main draws, where he can actually not have to worry about fitness levels or anything like that from having played matches to get into qualifying. But another one of these great stories that we see of Australian battlers that, as Roddy said, was a gun junior, talked highly and regarded very highly in the community. Injury struck down, and all of a sudden now his body's allowing him to be able to play the tennis that probably most expected him to play years ago.
Now, Kyrgios and De Minaur both play unseeded players. Sets up the possibility, from my view of the draw, of a quarter-final between the two. That's a mouth-watering match for all Australian tennis fans, Roddy?
Yep, 100%. And they should both get through as well. I think Kyrgios has Nakashima, young American kid. I mean, as Coutta said, they all seem to have a big game, and Nakashima is no different, but Kyrgios is bigger and better. And Nick's the kind of guy that when he sees what's ahead of him in the draw, he can get quite excited by that. It seems to be in tournaments where if he's playing a bit of a no-name and he's got a no-name next, you'd almost back him to lose. But if he knows he's got a quarter with Demon or a semi with Rafa looming, he seems to level up for that. And Demon's got Christian Garin, I think. Yep. And Garin's a solid player, clay court specialist, and his rankings dropped because he hasn't been able to find the same results on clay as he had in previous years. But Demon's got to be the favourite there, better grass court game, more comfortable on the surface. Don't see any reason why we shouldn't have an all-Aussie quarterfinal.
And Kubler, if he gets through, will be playing Nadal.
Yeah, I mean, scary. That could be scary is the only way I'd really put it. I mean, it's better than playing Nadal at the French, but there'd be something quite sweet about seeing the bloke that was called Mini Rafa to come up against him if he could do it. Yeah.
With nothing to lose.
Exactly. Like, who knows?
Yeah.
Rafa
It's a free shot at it. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, Roddy, if I had to ask you which of the three Australians left in the draw will go furthest, who would you say it will be?
Nick.
Okay. And Coutta, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I think overnight, the performance of Kyrgios, and if you don't watch the whole match, just watch the last 3 points, you will see a showcase of Nick Kyrgios' brilliance. And then the after-match press conferences by both people were quite petulant. But I think out of it, and Roddy, you might agree here, is that Nick probably now has a reason to go deeper in the tournament if he didn't have one already. Listening to Tsitsipas sort of talk about Kyrgios as a bully and everything like that after it. To win in 4 sets against Tsitsipas on grass is a terrific effort. Mentally, Nick, I think, was in a great space, and then he switched off because he was winning, and then spoke to everyone in the ground and grandstands, and even called for anyone that wasn't on the court to come and have a chat with him during the match. So I think he'll go the furthest. How far can he go is probably the next question. His game at the moment and is just like the big serve, the big forehand, and his backhand doesn't get enough credit. Like, his backhand's just solid, and it's just a punch. It's not a big swing or anything like that. It's just a nice sort of easy swing punch sort of backhand that allows him to move players around the court so he can open up the forehand. So he's like, honestly, he's every chance to win it. But then he's every chance to lose to De Minaur in the quarterfinal. So you'd like to see him go further in the tournament because I think he's playing as well as he ever has.
Roddy, can I just ask, following that, about Kyrgios? He drives me spare, to be honest, because I'm a very old-fashioned, I remember the days with John Newcombe jumping over the net and saying, well done, old chap, and all that sort of old school stuff. I know that's changed, but I just wonder whether Kyrgios actually needs to be the character that he's become. It's sort of part of his shtick now. It's actually part of his tennis to be like that. What do you think?
Yep. I am a Nick fan, but sometimes I'm left a little betwixt and between. When it comes to the carry on, and so like the engaging with the crowd, like at the Australian Open, he was the puppeteer and the crowd were his puppets. And I was at a lot of those matches, singles and doubles. That was awesome. That atmosphere cannot be replicated anywhere else. And so it seems like sometimes he wants the crowd like that, and he demands it of the crowd. And when the crowd give it to him, it leads to just some unbelievable tennis. Other times he doesn't want it, but the crowd want to give it to him anyway. And that's when he can get a little, it feels like he can contradict himself a bit because he asks for it in some instances and then he bats it away in others. And so it's hard to really know what Nick wants on the day. And does he have to do it? He probably does. Like, I probably liken him to, I don't know, maybe like a Toby Green, someone who needs that white line fever sort of stuff to play his best. Now, obviously, I'm comparing and contrasting two pretty different athletes in different sports, but it sort of seems like it comes from the same place. Nick needs that. He likes being the villain. I mean, maybe he doesn't like being the villain, but he likes having that energy and being told he can't do things because he seems to thrive off turning around and saying, well, you shouldn't have doubted me, or who said I couldn't do that sort of thing. So I think it probably brings out the best in him. And if that's what he needs to do, then so be it, I guess.
It's an interesting one because he hasn't played on last night wasn't. He hasn't played on centre court yet, I don't think.
Correct.
And I'm not sure the Royal Box would respond overly well to Nick's antics on court. But last night, as an example, he was arguing with the line or the central umpire about Tsitsipas hitting the ball into the crowd and hitting a spectator as to why he wasn't defaulted for that. Now, I don't know Nick needs to get involved in that. Like it's just play on, I would have thought. But he had a running argument with the umpire around that. Now, there's no difference at the end of the day between what Tsitsipas did last night and Djokovic did to get defaulted. But the umpire didn't default him. So Nick, I don't know. You're right. It's just his shtick. It's just the way that he sort of goes about it. And even in one of his earlier round matches, he had the crowd on side, and then at one stage someone coughed or something during a serve, and all of a sudden he gave absolute crap to the crowd. So I don't know. I think the thing with Nick is that he's not a tennis player. And when I say that, I don't think tennis is his greatest love. He's a very good tennis player that happens to be well paid for playing tournaments, and people like him. But if he could be a basketballer, he'd be a basketballer. So, like, people last night, the stuffy English commentators were going after him pretty hard. I don't know who the commentators were last night on Channel 9, but one of them was calling for him to be defaulted, and couldn't give a lot of credit to him for the way that he actually played because of all the other stuff that was going on. But the way he played last night shows what a talent he is. And like they're talking, and Roddy, we talked about last time, I don't think he'll ever win a Grand Slam, and I don't think he really cares that if he does win a Grand Slam.
Agree.
But what he's brought to tennis and what he's bringing to tennis at the moment is something that we have not seen.
Yep.
Like McEnroe did his stuff back in the 80s and the 90s, and obviously he got defaulted at the Australian Open and was the super brat, referred to as a super brat. But Kyrgios is at a different level. Like he's like, it really is amazing. Like you're watching, he's arguing with his boxer. And last night, I didn't think Nick's dad had to wear body armor last night, wasn't he? He was wearing like a bulletproof vest or something. I'm thinking, surely the crowd's not going to go that hard at him. But I don't know, Professor. At the end of the day, we've got this talent that's playing unbelievable tennis and can probably do anything on the court. But will he win a Grand Slam? Is he good for tennis? Do we enjoy it? Everyone's going to have their own opinions. Me personally, I hate when he does it against another Australian. I think that's pretty shit form. But he's a freak on the court. His tennis last night and some of the stuff he did. Like, who hits a drop shot on match point? Who serves volleys, on set point down, on a second serve? Like, the tiebreaker last night was everything that is good about Nick Kyrgios and tennis in general.
All right, Roddy, who's going to win the men's from here?
I'm of the belief that everyone's playing for second behind Novak. Nick, the thing is that Nick could definitely beat him. But is he going to be fit enough and have the energy to go 5 against Novak if he can, with what is required of him to actually get to that point? I doubt. Rafa hasn't beaten Novak on anything on grass or hard since 2013. So, I mean, if those two play off, I'm sure it'll be an epic match, but I find it hard to tip Rafa in those circumstances, even with what he's done this year. So for me, it's Novak.
Okay. Coutta, you changed your mind since last week?
No. It's Novak's playing well. His first round against Kokonakis was super impressive. Kokonakis didn't do much wrong, but just shows how good this guy is and how consistent he is. Just on it, I don't know if anyone watch the Novak match the other night, and they had John McEnroe commentating with Todd Woodbridge. And Judge, you would have loved it because John McEnroe spent the first 5 minutes talking about what happened at the Australian Open and if there are any consequences of what happened. And around the tournament, well, he didn't mention Craig Tiley, but he was certainly asking questions about if anything's happened since the tournament.
All right, Coutta. Now, before we let you go, Roddy, there are a couple of Australians who, whilst not doing all that well in the singles, are having some great tournaments. Matty Ebden's still in the doubles and the mixed doubles. John Peers, your mate Coutta, he's still in the doubles and the mixed doubles. And also Ellen Perez, she's in the doubles and the mixed doubles. So plenty to like about what's happening with Australian tennis at the moment, Roddy.
Absolutely. Ebden and Purcell are definitely taking the long road there. I think that's 2 5-set matches in the first 2 rounds. But they are a lethal doubles team. Like, not many people want to come up against those two. I mean, they're the 14th seeds, or maybe it's the 15th seed. But if you look at their win-loss just as when they're appearing together, these two are on. They're bloody good. So they're doing really well. Ellen Perez is doing good things. She's just one of those sort of tennis players that, like Max, has to balance when you play the doubles tournaments and when you play the singles tournaments, because where you have a mismatch, like Storm Sanders is another one. If you're a top-tier doubles player but a mid-tier singles player, you can't always go to an event and play both because your singles ranking might not make the cutoff for the singles event, despite the fact you're a great doubles player. So I think Ellen's a star, really crafty player. Seems to play with a new partner every other week, but it doesn't seem to slow her down either. So hopefully them or John Pearce can lift some silverware.
Coutta, any Gelding?
Yeah, Professor, before we go, can we get Roddy's tip again for the women's? I've written down Novak and I'm thinking about having doubling up. So if we can get Roddy's tip and David's again for the women's, might be able to have an investment during the week.
Amanda Anisimova, the young American in the bottom half of the draw, I think. Amanda Anisimova. She is playing some big tennis. Seems to be, she had a lot of personal stuff going on, which probably slowed her down for a little bit there, but she seems to be right as rain at this point. Beautiful.
A nice little double.
Yeah.
She's the girl that Ash Barty beat at the French Open. I think it was, Roddy, when Ash went a set down, I think, against her.
Yeah, she was like not 18 at that point or 17 at that point, Anisimova.
Yeah. And your pick, David?
No, it was the same. I as I said last week, I couldn't see the top seed Iga losing a set at the tournament, but her run came to 37 and she's out. So, and then obviously some of the other top seeds have been bundled. And we always love the term bundled, don't we, when it comes to tennis? They don't lose, they get
I was going to say,
out.
I'm dialing in from Sydney. Right as rain, I thought was a nice touch because I don't think there was this much flooding when Noah decided to get all the animals up in the ark, I don't think. So it's an absolute deluge up here in Sydney.
Roddy and David, thanks for your tip, because now we can just double up on the double.
Fantastic.
Yeah. All right, now, before you go, Roddy, there's one other question I had for you, and it revolves around how successful we've been in this tournament. When I look through the media, there's hardly any mention of the names that we've talked about today, except for Nick Kyrgios, who seems to be sucking the life out of the media for any other Australian tennis player.
Yeah, that's probably fair. I think that people love to hate Nick, and those that love him are vocal about it, and those that don't like him are equally as vocal about that. It sells newspapers. It brings people to brings the viewership up. It brings attendance up. It does all of that. I think that it is a shame that some of the other stories aren't getting as big a mention. I mean, Jason Kubler should be all anyone's talking about for the next week. Demon is looking pretty good, and he's had a couple of tough battles against some Brits. So, you know, taking on the home crowd as well. Like that's no mean feat. So they're looking pretty good. Hopefully, people focus less on what makes Nick, and start to focus, because what gets lost as well, it gets lost how good he is. And Coutta touched on it. Like, he is, on his day when he wants to be, one of, if not the best player around. And that gets lost a little bit. And what it also means is, as you said, we're not discussing other storylines, other narratives. And Tomjanovic should be getting more credit. So should Demon, so should Cooper, so should Purcell and Everton and Perez. So, yeah, well, I agree.
The good thing, Roddy, is we've highlighted it on this show. So at least we've got the names out there. Thanks very much for your time today, Roddy. We really, really appreciate it. It gives us an edge, we think, in tennis. We might get you back on once the US Open comes around, if that's all right.
Sounds great. We'd love to come back.
Terrific. All right. Many thanks, and we'll catch you again when the US Open's almost with us.
Fantastic.
Up to Sydney to Paul Dalligan. Paul, I've got a question for you, Paul. When will the rain abate?
Well, I went and bought this jacket, I think, last worn by Edmund Hillary. It's very wet up here, I'll give you the tip, but almost as impressive as that sweater you've got on there, Professor. That's like the Curiosity Show. Here's one we knitted earlier. I like it.
Paul, what does Sydney have good going for it apart from the harbour?
Oh, Dad's here. Just be careful. It's a great city. Don't worry about that. It's all happening here. What there is a very good baklava shop between here and the airport, which I'll be visiting in about an hour's time.
All right, now, Paul, round 16. It's been a terrific round so far. Started on Thursday night. Now, be careful because I've got Schooner here with me today. Sea Eagles 36, Storm 30, 7 tries to 6. It was a bit of a score fest. Craig Bellamy said, we got what we deserved for 70 minutes. Not often you'd see a Craig Bellamy side let in so many tries in such a fashion.
When you say be careful about our favourite Manly fan, is he about to do a nude cartwheel or something? Because that's how excited he would have been with the win. I did tip it to those who'd listen. It might have been my A-list tips there, Gelding. But no, I also tipped Cooler to score 2 tries, and he duly saluted. So maybe if we had a midweek show, I could have got that in there for the listeners. But Manly has been, I tipped them to win it all. I'm not saying they will, but I think they'll sneak into the 8. Craig Bellamy went further than that, Professor, and he did something you don't see very often from the master motivator. He had a shot at his own players in the press conference. I think maybe that could be kept for behind closed doors, but he simply said, you can't blame our injuries. You can't blame who we were missing. He's looking at you, Cameron Munster, but he said you just paid at this level to tackle, and they didn't do it. So that was very, very embarrassing for the Storm team to hear that from their coach. They were pretty atrocious, but I'm not a fan of the public beheadings too much, but that seemed to be the way Bellamy wanted to go about it.
He didn't mention the name, but there was a name that I think anyone that watched that game would understand who it was. And we don't have plus minuses when you're on the field, but when you're a particular player and you're negative 28, I'm not sure you're going to get picked to play again for the Storm.
Who was that?
Nikorima.
Oh, Nikorima, yeah. No, he was a rookie. So throwing him into that match at Brookvale Oval, I've been there in a Rabbitohs 1988 jersey. It wasn't fun, I can tell you. It's a tough place to play, but the Storm have owned them over the years. And it puts another underline under how important Cameron Munster is to that team. You can have all the stats you like. They missed that spark, and Manly just brought the heat from the start, and it was explosive, Manly. Then that's the Manly we've been waiting to see all season, and they've arrived. And I think it arrived in a way that even Craig Bellamy, who's quite a pessimist, wasn't expecting. Yep. But Nikorima, I don't think he'll be playing again. They cannot wait for Munster to get back. There's some mind games going on between the Storm and Wayne Bennett, not surprisingly, because Wayne Bennett somehow told someone who announced it to the world that he's confident of getting Munster, not just at the end of 2023 when his deal expires, but next year as well. Now, keep in mind, Wayne Bennett can get in someone's head better than Sigmund Freud. But this is a new level even for him, that he's talking about the best player in the game. He's going to get out of a contract a year early. So that's more balls than Keno from Wayne. I think that's, even by his standards, very confident.
Yeah, go on, Coutta.
Sorry, Professor. Paul, isn't this more around the tampering, what Wayne Bennett's doing at the moment, what the Dolphins are doing, and bringing the game into like a little bit of disrepute?
Well, he'll look anyone in the eye and say he hasn't actively made any approaches, but there must have been some discussions behind the scene. I know you're not a fan of Braith Anasta, Munster's manager, running a TV show where he's discussing his players' performance. I'm not a fan of that either. It screams conflict. But Munster has a pretty clear decision whether he wants to give up $3-4+ $100,000 a year to stay at a champion team, to start with a bunch of decent players, none phenomenally good, thrown together. It's a touch of the Dad's Army, the Redcliffe team, and it's a touch of up-and-coming superstars, but it doesn't have that meat in the sandwich, if you call it that, of players who'll be there for 3, 4, 5 years who are stars now. You've got half the Storm forward pack going, but I think that they don't have too many years left. They've signed Sean O'Sullivan, who's not going to put too many bums on seats as their star halfback, but they do need a marquee signing, and they haven't quite got one yet, and Munster would fit that bill. The issue, though, I think, is I think they're having trouble coming up with the third-party type agreements, which often get someone over the line. He's looking at you, Sydney Roosters, but also the Broncos seem to manage to hold on to players like they've just done with Selwyn Cobbo, who had all but 3 clubs chasing him, and he's elected to stay at the Broncos, which is an enormous sign of faith in where the Broncos are headed. So I just don't think Wayne Bennett on his own has got the pull. And I actually think I'm leaning towards Munster staying with the Storm, if you can believe that. But we will see what happens.
All right, Paul. Could quickly. I want to move on.
Paul, that's all right. Move on.
All right. Friday night, Paul, the Titans, are they that bad? They obviously can't defend out wide because Edric Lee with 5 tries and Dominic Young with 3 tries for the Knights just made a meal of the Gold Coast Titans. They ran through like they weren't there.
Who would have thought at the start of our respective seasons that the Gold Coast Suns could be the first team to succeed on the Gold Coast? I had such hopes in the Titans, as a lot of people did. What the Titans have started doing is the dreaded, the coach has got the full support of the board. We all know how that ends. But more than that, they're cherry-picking off his assistants. So rather than sacking him, this is Holbrook, they're firing all his assistants. So he's going to have no army to lead there in the coaching ranks. And that's a very nasty way of going about removing a coach, which appears to be what the Titans are headed towards. Once the coach has lost confidence in himself, the team loses confidence in the coach, and it's like a cancer, and it snowballs, and it's not going to end well for the Titans or, unfortunately, Holbrook at the Titans.
So if we compare Friday night's game, if you sat down for the entree, you might have lost your appetite. But by crikey, the Panthers-Roosters game was one for the ages. That was a terrific Friday night game.
And it shows the spirit of the Roosters with the players that they're missing. Luke Keary, their best organiser, was out with concussion. He's facing some real decisions about his future in the game, given we know what concussions can do. I think he's had 4 in 18 months. If I'm Luke Keary's manager or Luke Keary himself, he'd be wondering whether he's going to play on. And that may tie into the Roosters making a play at Munster, but that's for another week. The Roosters were incredibly brave, but the Panthers are full steam ahead, $1.10, I think it is, to win a minor premiership. So they are out-and-out favourites to win the comp, as they should be if we can tie that into State of Origin, where we saw the sort of players that they've got. Nathan Cleary could turn out to be the best player in the game, they're saying. He's only 24, and what he's already achieved by 24 is freakish. He's still got 5, 6, 7, 8 plus years left in the game. He could eclipse every record held. That's what they're saying. He could be that good at, because he's this good already at 24.
There were 2 games played in Sydney yesterday. Both of them needed water wings, snorkel, face mask, you name it. It started raining before the Bulldogs Sharks game and was still raining when the Rabbitohs and Eels game finished last night. I've got to hand it to those 4 teams. They played terrific rugby in very trying conditions.
Well, you'd back a Shark over a Bulldog underwater, I'd have to say. And that's exactly how it happened. But you could have picked it on paper that was going to happen, with no disrespect to your Dogs. the Rabbitohs, very, very pleasing win over the Eels, that the Rabbitohs season is back on track on the back of Latrell Mitchell, who has already declared, you don't call me in the Game 3 squad for New South Wales because I'm focused on the Rabbitohs. So there's commitment for you. They did spend 50 grand sending him to America to work with the world's renowned hamstring expert. And he's back and he's playing phenomenally, but he said to Brad Fittler, don't even try picking me for Game 3. My focus is on the Rabbitohs. So that was incredible there. We've got 2 games coming up today, very shortly. The Warriors. Now, they haven't played in New Zealand, I think, since our show started. No, seriously, it seems it's 2 or 3 years since they've played at home. I think they started lining up on Tuesday and the haka started on about Wednesday, I think. So they will win today. I will guarantee it. The Warriors will beat the West Tigers. Get that out, Gelding, and that's it. That's the giraffe guarantee. They will be fired up, like Jake the Must style in Once for Warriors. Hopefully, not swinging any bar stools around, but they will be very pumped up.
Hopefully, not that fired up, home. Giraffe.
The what?
Hopefully, not that fired up.
No, well, I was going to say hide the bar stools, but no. On a serious note, it's a proud rugby league country. They're proud of their team, and they haven't been there for years. And the haka to welcome the players during the week was incredibly emotional. I can only imagine today how many tongues will be out with those fiery eyes. And I wouldn't want to be a West Tigers player because it's not going to be fun for them today. The Warriors will do that easy.
And for the people having a small investment on that game, what will the final score be?
22-10, I think. I think the Warriors will come out like they've been shot out of a cannon and the Tigers won't recover.
And the 4:00 game, the Dragons in 9th playing the Raiders 11th. It's really the last chance for either of these teams, isn't it, if they're serious about making the 8?
It is. I actually think the Dragons as outsiders will win that game. I just think that they might have too much class there and, as I said, too much at stake. But you're right, it's the last chance to learn for both teams.
Much to Kevin Yapp's pleasure if the Dragons do get up.
Well, yeah, but our bet is that the Dragons will finish ahead of the Sharks. There's more chance of it stopping raining here in the next 5 minutes than the Dragons finishing ahead of the Sharks. I'll give him the tip now.
All right, and for those having a wager, the final score on the Dragons-Raiders game?
I think in the wet, Dragons will be 22, Raiders 16.
All right, Paul, thanks. Look, we know you've got commitments, so you better go back to those, and thanks for being on the program today.
Good stuff. Thanks, all.
All right, Judge and Gelding, you've been the quietest out of all of us. We might finish the show with your tips, Gelding, but before we do your tips, I read in the Age today that they've got a task force for the Tasmanian team saying they're going to be competitive by 2026 and that they'll win a flag within 5 years of being in. I didn't even know there was going to be a Tasmanian team, but now they're talking about it as though it was a fait accompli. What is the vote?
Yeah, this is the greatest bit of nonsense I've heard in a long time, Professor. There won't be a Tasmanian team which is going to win a premiership. There won't be a 19th team. There won't be a stadium. The whole thing's been run by a fellow who's about to leave the AFL, Gil McLachlan. I do not know what the commission, which is supposed to be running the game, is saying about this. And this team they've got, the team of experts they're going to look at, the list and all the rest of it, are 3 Todgers from existing teams whose only obligation is to look after the betterment of their team. What the hell are they going to do to advise the AFL how to make a team competitive, which will knock them off for any premiership desires they've got in the next 5 years? The whole thing is just another one of Gil's, gee, I better tick a few boxes before I leave this job. Okay, Tasmanian football. And 19th team, bugger off. Not going to happen. All the suggestion about the young players who are somehow hiding in Tasmania and jumping into an academy, all those good players are going to be in Victoria or New South Wales or Western Australia or somewhere else. They're not going to be just waiting, hoping like all hell that they're going to get a team that they can join. The money they're talking about, the AFL, by the way, and this is the history of the AFL, they never put money into new teams. That's all left to those who own the team, those who are supporting it, or the respective governments. But the AFL puts in very little money, and they'll put in very little money in Tasmania, a $750 million stadium. Oh, come on. The whole thing's got mud written all over it, if you ask me, Professor.
Gelding?
And sorry, guys, I was just going to say, are the Tasmanian government cooling on the idea being proposed with the change of government?
What's the idea, though, Gelding? What is the actual idea that they've been asked? 19th team. I thought there's going to be a relocated team. They're talking about St Kilda, talking about North Melbourne. I don't think it's even gets to that government stage. This is a pie in the sky concept for Gil McLaughlin's farewell tour.
Yeah. Was the league saying, or the AFL or Gil or whatever, saying to the government, you've got to build this stadium, otherwise we won't come?
Possibly.
And without
this stadium, 25,000, which is 5,000 more than Hobart and Launceston at the moment. They're both 20,000 stadiums. Well, what do they get at GWS? 6,000 at a game? Maybe 20,000's okay. Maybe they can be built up to 25,000. It's nonsense.
Well, as we were talking off air, it'll be interesting to see what GWS gets against Hawthorn today at their ground in the rather chilly rain, seeing it so open.
And premiership in 5 years, Professor, how the hell they can make that prediction on the basis of this plan is just I know that the public swallow all this crap, but I don't. I think it's an absolute nonsense. Coutta,
is Eddie? You know that the battler from Broadmeadows, Eddie Maguire, is he involved somewhere in this?
I hope not. Oh God, I hope not. But he may be.
Yeah.
Well, if he doesn't make a comment on it, Caroline Wilson does. And all it's doing is just feeding the papers and the TV shows, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. It's the way that they do things. Like there'll be some announcement this week, so they're distracting us by throwing up this Tasmanian stuff, right? And there'll be some announcement on the other side about a rule change or a something like that. Like they've just announced Robbie Williams as the head act for the grand final. Who cares? Do we really care? Like, is it not?
Because the AFL probably forked out $1 million to get him there for one or two songs. Ridiculous.
And
NFL do that so much better than we do. They had Greenspoon sing at the bloody State of Origin.
Well, the other thing, Gelding, is that they're also, my understanding is the support act is a person that's sledged living suitcases out of Melbourne over the last 2 years.
Yeah. But you notice now that the AFL are now saying what a success and how good Gold Coast Suns are. For years, the basket case.
About Tasmania? I'm just saying to Mark, do you have a different view about Tasmania? So perhaps I'm a bit negative. Well, I'm very negative on the whole thing, but do you see that there is any prospect at all of this 19th team getting up and winning a premiership?
I find that it's laughable, the suggestion of a 19th team to start with, because what's the concept? As you quite rightly pointed out, Judge, all the publicity was around, now we're going to relocate a team. It's not going to be a Tasmanian team to start with. We're going to relocate somebody, most probably North Melbourne. And that was the headlines. And then the reason that this is on today's agenda is because I was bewildered to see they're now talking about, it's going to be a team in its own right. And I was just trying to think when it actually changed or who changed their mind about which way the media would direct the discussion. Because if you're paying attention to it, none of it makes any sense. I can't see a plan. What do we know? We know if we need certainty, and what else, John? Consistency. Right. Yep. So let's have certainty. Let's have consistency. For goodness sake, let's have a plan. The Tasmanian plan is like trying to plan the AFLW. There is no plan. It's just all done on the run, ad hoc.
I'll give you this little tidbit. One of the building blocks is teams to be given priority draft picks, but forced to trade many for senior players. What does that mean? That the other clubs have got to give up their senior players? Bugger off. St Kilda's, it takes years to build up their team, and we need them all, and we're not going to give them to this Tasmanian.
Hey, mate, Max
John,
pull forward for the new Tasmanian team.
Yeah, apparently, yeah.
John, that happened previously when the Brisbane Bears came in with Fitzroy.
Yeah.
Sides had to trade their senior players, so they'd have senior players up there, and they gave them whatever they wanted.
Yep.
Yeah. Gelding and the AFLW draft was this week too, Professor. I somehow snuck that up on me. That just that's a bit like Ronnie Burns when he used to play. Just popped up now and again, and you didn't know. But my understanding was that it was done this week, Professor.
Yes, that's another thing that snuck under everybody's guard.
Can I have a question on that, Professor?
Yes, you
to
can.
David? Sydney had 5 picks in the top 13, and I noticed Richmond's first tip was number 38. How does that work out?
Because of priority picks for the newly entering teams, Gelding.
5 in the top 13?
Well, they've got to get players from somewhere.
Wow. Wow.
You know what it is? It's a compromised draft, Gelding. Compromised is the word.
Yeah.
But you make a great point, Coutta, and that is that. So if I go to the AFL page in the Age this morning, there is one story out of 21 stories on the AFL, one story on the AFLW, 4%. And the draft was this week. They couldn't find any stories to write about the young women who were drafted. That's unbelievable. But, Judge, you would know this is what we've been talking about. If you're running the draft during round 14 of the AFL season, the AFLW draft's not going to get much media.
And which is just ridiculous, because what the papers need is stories. If you can't tell me there's not a few good stories in the AFLW draft, I'll go home. It's just a lack of interest which emanates from the AFL itself. And I think it wasn't a tragedy, but it's a very sorry state of affairs for women's football, which we, we're supporting.
Judge, isn't this the whole problem, right? Is that the AFL is running the AFLW. So the AFL sets the agenda, and if they don't want to do it, they won't do it. So the AFLW draft this week with the introduction of the new clubs was a story in itself, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like the number 1 draft pick's gone to, like, I think I saw more stuff, and this is an absolute indictment on the AFL and the AFL, is that you saw more stuff come from the leagues that the players came from and the clubs that the players came from than anything from the AFL and AFLW.
Yeah. After the AFL's too busy talking about this bloody Tasmanian nonsense.
Or too busy about Patrick Dangerfield making a return to the football field with Geelong. That was, if I saw more about that in the media, then it was crazy. There should be less about that and more about the AFLW, but that's another story. All right, Gelding, today's tips, and remembering that the Professor's parlay is still alive, depending on Richmond Tigers to beat the West Coast Eagles.
Let's hope, Professor. Let's hope the very successful Professor's parlay gets up. So
we don't want last leg syndrome.
Oh, did you have to bring that up, Professor? Really? Today, Professor, as you know, I do like the jumps races. The Mournival has 5 out of the first 7 races as jumps races today. The first tip that we sent through, Chains of Honour, got up at short odds, Professor, but a winner's small fish are sweet. Race 3, we might go number 2, Big Blue, over the hurdles. Then follow up with race 4, number 8, Under the Bridge in the steeple. And follow that with, in race 5, number 2, Britannis. in the steeplechase, and then follow on with He's a Form, race 6, number 1. As we also mentioned, Professor, Pakenham Synthetic today, 9 races. The first was at 11:05.
That's a bit early, Gelding.
Sorry, a bit early.
A bit early.
So we thought by the end of the show we'll be up to race 5, Professor. So, more than halfway through the meeting. So we like race 5, number 9, Hasta, into race 7, number 6, Johnny Buccanara, and into race 8, number 3, Wild Gem, Professor. So let's see how they go for our listeners today. And let's hopefully we can get the Professor's parlay up.
Well, fingers crossed, Gelding. Many thanks for your time today, Coutta, Judge and Gelding. Great discussion on Wimbledon. And hopefully those Aussie players will at least get a little bit further in the tournament, maybe surprise us and get to the final. Something we can look back on next week and you can review the whole tournament for us.
No problems at all.
All right. So until next Sunday, a very good afternoon to you all.
See you, boys.
Well done, boys.